Hey everyone, Frank with IceAge Performance. Today we're going to be installing our Elevate spindle kit on a Polaris Matryx. This also applies to Axys snowmobiles as well. So we're going to go through what comes in the kit when you purchase it from us, tools needed, torque specs, and the full installation on the front end of the Elevate spindle kit, and the benefits that it has to your snowmobile, which is going to be a more fun snowmobile to ride, more nimble, lighter feeling. You can ride it in a more neutral position, and it has a 1 inch taller dimension, which decreases snow drag and increases the center of gravity, so it makes it a lot more flickable. So a more fun snowmobile to ride is ultimately what we're creating here. Within the box, we have a pair of spindles. All of our Elevate kits are sold as a complete set, so as a pair with hardware. And today, we're installing the lightweight version of our Elevate spindle kit for the Polaris snowmobile, but the installation process will be the exact same for our bomber spindles as well. We have hardware and instructions. These will replace a few of the factory fasteners, and we'll go over which ones these replace and the orientation of those bolts that we provide and the washers as well. So we'll go into more depth as we install this on the snowmobile. So this is what you'll receive, and next we're going to show you the tools that you'll need. We're using a 3/8 ratchet or a 3/8 impact driver for wrenches. We have a 13, 15, and 17 millimeter. I prefer to have 2 of the 15 millimeter wrenches, one preferably with a ratcheting end, not totally necessary, just as long as you have 2 of them. For sockets, 17 deep well, 16, 15, and 14 millimeter, an 8 millimeter Allen, and of course, since we're disassembling the front end of the stock components and reinstalling, we will need to retorque everything to factory spec, so we have a good torque wrench as well. So that's all the tools that you'll need. Now we'll begin taking the stock components off and reinstalling with our Elevate kit. Easiest way to install the Elevate spindles is going to be getting the sled up off the ground. That way the front end is in the air. Whether you have a sled lift like this or a floor jack, block of wood, moto stand, whatever will get the front end off the ground, makes it a lot easier, so that way you don't have to fight the sled quite as much. So we're going to start tearing it apart. We'll get these stock spindles off the machine on both sides and then start reinstalling the Elevate spindles. First up, I like to remove the ski. We're going to use a 15 and 16 millimeter and take this off. Next, we'll remove the ski bushings here, and we'll set these aside. We'll use this on the new Elevate spindles. As we disassemble the factory spindle, we really don't need to keep track of the factory hardware, washers, bolts, and stuff like that, because in the Elevate kit, we pretty much provide all new hardware. So don't be too concerned with the washer placement. We're gonna go over where the washers go that we include in the kit. We're gonna take off the upper ball joint using an 8 millimeter for the top here, and then the nut on the bottom, and just loosen it up. And just leave the tie rod hanging out there. And next we'll do the lower control arm bolt. And there we have it. The factory spindle is off the sled. So now we just have our upper and lower control arms and tie rod completely loose, and these are ready to accept the Elevate spindles. Here's our lightweight Elevate spindle for the Polaris. Again, we have the bomber one as well, but today we're doing the lightweight and fully forged, and it's gonna look a lot better on this sled, as well as making a more confidence-inspiring sled to ride, and just more fun. So we're gonna get these on here, but first we're gonna go through the hardware. In the hardware kit, this is what you'll receive. There's instructions in here, as well as a QR code that you can scan for instructional videos that will lead you to this one. But just want to go over what's included in here, which is new nylock nuts. These are fresh. We don't include Loctite in the kit, so that's personal preference. If you want a little peace of mind, you can use Loctite, but otherwise these are fresh. You don't need to use Loctite. but there will be 2 new bolts as well for the lower control arm, and then an assortment of washers that we'll go over where those are placed on the spindles as we install it. We're gonna hand tighten all of the nuts that are included in the hardware kit, and what we're doing is locating the 2 coarse thread nuts that are for the tie rod on each side. So just trying to separate them and avoid any sort of cross threading. So just taking what's included in the hardware kit, throwing it on there. You can see that one just went right on correctly, and it bottoms out on that nylock. If it's incorrect, it'll kind of jam itself up a little bit, just cross-threading itself. And by doing this, you can avoid any sort of trouble like that or cross-threading, and trying to sort out, again, the 2 coarse thread nuts for the tie rod out of the 6 that are provided in the kit. So just hand tighten everything first if you want to be sure, and you'll have a better day. Starting with the lower control arm first, we're using the provided bolt and the bronze washer, and going up through the bottom here, another bronze washer on the top, and threading the nut on top by hand. Next is the upper control arm. We'll do a bronze washer on the top here, drop it through, and then 1 silver washer on the bottom, and thread the nut on there. And lastly will be the tie rod. 1 silver washer on the top, put it through the tie rod tab, 1 silver washer on the bottom, and thread that by hand as well. So everything just needs to be snugged up. Next, we'll get everything torqued to spec and tightened down. So this is all new hardware, and that's the correct washer orientation. Using a 17 deep well and a 13 millimeter, we're gonna get the tie rod tightened up. Just snug for now, and then we'll come through with the torque wrench and get everything torqued to spec. Next will be the upper here, 8 millimeter and 17 for the nut. Same thing with this, just snug for now, then we'll come through with the torque wrench and get everything torqued to spec. Lastly is the lower ball joint here. We'll get this bolt and nut tightened with a 14 on the bottom here and 17 on the nut. Torque spec for the lower control arm bolt is going to be 40 foot-pound. So we'll use the 17 and the 14 and get that tightened. Upper ball joint will be the same as the lower at 40 foot-pounds. And the tie rod will be 37 foot-pounds using a 17 and a 13. So now everything is torqued to spec. We're ready to get the ski back on, get that torqued, and then we'll repeat all these steps on the other side. Next up is the ski spacers here and the through shaft. So we'll put this on the spindle, and we like to put these spacers on each side of the spindle. Makes it a little more consistent on snow. It's not quite the narrowest or the widest setting, but just it will keep the ski balanced more and just a position that we recommend here at IceAge. Get this put back in here and aligned, and we'll get that ski bolt started, making sure that one of the washers we took off at the beginning is on each side. Sometimes with these Solage ski rubbers, or any ski rubber really, it can be a little tricky to get this through, so it helps to either lower the sled down or use a power tool, and you can thread that all the way through, just like so, and then we can get that tightened up to spec. Since we're reinstalling a nylock nut that's been removed, a little dab of Loctite wouldn't hurt, so we'll just put some of that on, and then washer, get that snugged up there, and this uses a 16 and a 15 millimeter. And tighten this to 37 foot-pounds. The Elevate spindles are fully installed on this sled. Everything is ready to go, torqued to spec, put back together. So we're gonna drop the sled back on the ground and cover some of the suspension adjustments necessary for the 1 inch taller dimension on these Elevate spindles. depending on the snow conditions, riding style, and the exact model that you have, these can all influence the suspension adjustments that you should choose on your machine for the Elevate spindles in the 1 inch taller dimension. We're gonna go over a couple different setups and baselines depending on whether you have a Pro RMK or a Chaos, and just a couple different iterations that you can start with. If you don't find what you're looking for in the printed instructions that we include in the kit with preload and suspension adjustment, please call us, we're happy to help, but we're just gonna go over a baseline setting of what typically works well for most riders. For a Pro RMK, we recommend using a Chaos profile rail with the Elevate spindles, and that way you can run it in the lower position on the front torque arm in the tunnel. And as you see here, this sled is in that position. There's 2 locations for the front torque arm. The one where the bolt is the pre-punched from the factory. That is where a Pro RMK would be positioned, assuming it's using the Chaos rails that we recommend. A Chaos can do either. A Chaos sled can be ran in the factory position or the dropped hole. The dropped hole is going to make the sled feel a lot more balanced, lighter on the front end, and accommodate for the 1 inch taller spindle. So that's kind of a baseline setting. Pro RMK, Chaos rails, drop skid, Chaos, you can run it in either, and then the preload adjustment that we call out in the printed instructions. So if you have any questions or need more clarification on these settings, don't hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help and coach you to a direction where your sled can be most weaponized in the backcountry. So thank you again for watching. This is the complete install and overview for the Elevate spindle kit for the Polaris Axys and Matryx snowmobiles.